I'm just saying, this entire conversation comes to an end when Patrick Kane signs a contract. Whether it be with the Detroit Red Wings, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Buffalo Sabres, or any of the other teams he has been linked to. But in this video, we are instead diving into some other squads that one of the most decorated NHL players in history could potentially sign with, assuming by the time this video was public on YouTube he remains unsigned. Let's hope, knock on wood, that Patrick Kane doesn't actually sign a contract on Sunday morning in the middle of July. But today, we are diving into Patrick Kane, Detroit Red Wings forward, and whether or not he could head over to either the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Montreal Canadiens. According to some reports, the Canadiens are the kind of team Patrick Kane would want. Let's get into the profile here first and foremost. So Patrick Kane, 37 years old, out of Buffalo, New York, USA, 5'10", 176, and a player that was first overall 19 years ago in 2007. Man, something about that just sounds wrong. 2007 was 19 years ago. How crazy. Patrick Kane is arguably, if not definitively, the best American-born hockey player of all time. Multiple 100-point seasons, multiple over-point-per-game seasons, and after a rough year in 2023 where he had to go through some sort of surgery to fix up his, I believe it was his hip? Not entirely sure. He ended up finding himself in the Detroit Red Wings organization for 3 seasons, where he had scored 47, 59, and 57 points respectively, all in limited games played numbers. So Patrick Kane has obviously been one of the better NHL players over the past few years, and one of the absolute best NHL players of the generation beforehand. And now, at 37, he is a free agent. At least assuming he hasn't actually signed before the time this video gets public on YouTube. We've spoken about a number of teams. Of course, the Detroit Red Wings would like to have Kane back. They were the team that Kane was most comfortable going to after his hip resurfacing surgery in 2023. He came over, he produced a bunch of points. Sure, there were a number of Wings fans that did not like the lack of off-puck effectiveness and lack of defensive responsibility out of Patrick Kane. But if the guy is scoring at a sub-point-per-game pace, especially in his mid to late 30s, I think there is a reasonable bandwidth to allow this kind of a player onto your team. There have been rumors as to whether or not Kane could go back over to Chicago, especially now with Connor Bedard out for a few months. There may need to be some bolstering up of the offense with the Blackhawks organization, and then there always is that discussion as to whether or not Kane could head back over to Buffalo, where he is originally from. But with that said, let's dive into some new reports. You had David Pagnotta speaking on Toronto Sports Rush last week about Patrick Kane and the Maple Leafs. He says he thinks there has been some conversations with Toronto, but they've probably been very loose. They got Jack Roslovic for $4 million instead. Now, if you were to ask me who would I rather have on my NHL team, Patrick Kane or Jack Roslovic, whether it be for 1 season or 2, I think Patty Kane is the clear favorite there. Just a lot more consistent with his offense. Sure, you can debate whether or not Roslovic is a better off-puck player than Patty Kane, but you get Kane for the points. You don't really get him for the defensive responsibility or what he does when he's off the puck. This is a guy who had been scoring 180, 90 points a season when he gets close to that full season's worth of play. And even in the season that he had last year, 57 points in 67 games played on a pretty subpar Red Wings team, that's still pretty good. Do the math over, I guess it's 84 now? That's the new NHL season. That's a 71-point pace. That's not bad for a guy who's 36, 37 years old. If the Toronto Maple Leafs want to align the past with the present, they could get Austin Matthews, Gavin McKenna, and Patty Kane all on the same line. That sounds ridiculous. Oh my gosh, a triple threat of first overall picks on one line down the middle. Hey, that might actually be league-shatteringly good, especially if Patty Kane can rub some of his knowledge and skills off onto Gavin McKenna, a guy who plays a pretty similar style to Kane. Kind of feels like a match made in heaven. Meanwhile, there is another conversation to have about Patrick Kane and the Montreal Canadiens. Take a look at this article posted by Michael Petit on donlescoulisses.com. The Canadiens are the kind of team that Patrick Kane would want. This article will be linked in the description, and it talks about how the Canadiens are still looking for reinforcements in their top six, whether it's through a second-line center or a winger, or both, to further surround Ivan Demidov. There is certainly room for improvement. Ideally, the Canadiens need to get bigger, however, we shouldn't dismiss options to improve the team's offense just because the player in question doesn't have a big physical presence, especially when the list of available top six caliber players is dwindling rapidly. Demidov needs help, and adding a talented veteran certainly wouldn't hurt. In this regard, Bruno Gervais on BPM Sports Talk Radio raised the name of Patty Kane. On the show earlier this week, during the Club du Matin program, Gervais mentioned that Patrick Kane could be a logical target, and he added the Canadiens are the kind of team Kane would want at this stage of his career. The article then says that Kane would be an excellent addition to the Montreal Canadiens, and for several reasons. First, he is a veteran with 3 cup rings. He is full of talent, which Ivan Demidov needs, and has extraordinary vision of the game. Moreover, he is 37 and had still amassed 57 points in 67 games last year, while playing just over 14 minutes of time on ice per game. It also should be noted that he excels in penalty shootouts. In fact, the American holds the all-time record for penalty shootout goals. It may seem insignificant, but these are goals that could earn the club a valuable extra point. While not disastrous, the club has lost more often than not in shootouts, with a record of 4-5. Adding a player like Kane would certainly help the Canadiens getting those valuable points, which can make all the difference in the standings at the end of the year. Obviously, he has never been known for being reliable defensively. That's not his role anyway. However, he could very well be considered a specialist in numerical advantage and would offer a significant boost to the second wave. He could even be used on the first power play if everything truly fails. And just hearing that idea that Patrick Kane, who would probably be interested in going to a competitive team, would probably fit with the Montreal Canadiens, there's something interesting about that in my mind. Like, when I think of Patrick Kane either going to Chicago to play with Bedard, going to Toronto to play with McKenna, or going over to Montreal to play with Ivan Demidov, all of these ideas are attractive to me as a fan of the sport of hockey. Of course, I'm a Canadiens and a Wings fan, so if Patrick Kane ends up sticking around in Detroit, that's fine, in my opinion. But as a fan of the sport, thinking about the past and the present and what Kane could provide these younger guys with all of his experience, this is a really big opportunity, and if you're able to capitalize, you could be looking at a very underrated addition in free agency. You gotta remember, Patty Kane was taken first overall in 2007, but it was somewhat of a controversial first overall pick back in the day, because he was small. 5'10", 176 rarely gets you drafted first overall, especially back in 2007. But the fact is, Patty Kane had 145 points in 58 London Knights games in that season. He was way over 2 points a game, approaching 3 points a game, and also dominated for Team USA at the World Juniors as an underage player. It's no wonder he was drafted first and immediately put up 70 points in his very first NHL season, also with the A on his sweater. It's kind of ridiculous, but Patty Kane's very talented. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the idea of the Toronto Maple Leafs getting Kane, the Montreal Canadiens being a destination that Kane wants to go to? Do you buy it? Do you not? Let me know in the comment section all your opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.